Oh, hello, this is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barton. Today we're going to be talking about this breaking story from the Daily Wire. One of their reporters went undercover to get a recommendation for a surgery to chop off his bowels, and it took like 20 minutes, 22 minutes. So I want to go through this thread with you guys in case none of you are Twitter heads, like I guess I am. And go through this process. It's pretty wild. I'm not surprised in the least bit, hearing different stories from detransitioners who were approved of hormones and other things very quickly. Like someone who I follow, they got, and I guess it's just not one person I follow, but they got prescribed like hormones and other things within like 30 minutes. But chopping off your balls, that's like that's up there to get a letter of recommendation to do that fast. So kudos to the Daily Wire for going out there and doing their thing. You know, they made buku views as far as like when they released "What Is a Woman" on Twitter. I think it was like 100 and it might have been close to like 180 million views. Last I looked, I think last we talked about on air was probably like 70 million or something like that, but that was last week. So they're just doing crazy with that, and congrats to them. It was a great documentary. It's why I subbed to them, because I did want to see it, and there was a big discussion between people like, should they just release it, or should they, because it's so important, why not just release it for everyone to see? And I understand they have to build their company, and so I was glad to support them in that endeavor. And it was a really good documentary. I'm glad that more people get to see it now, for sure, for certainly. So I want to talk about that story. Also, Tim Scott. I know this happened about 2 days ago, but of course we weren't on yesterday. And he went on The View to confront Sunny and the other women on the show, and I'm so glad. And I gotta say, he handled it probably so much classier than I would have done. Oh my gosh! So I think it's worth talking about. I think it's worth sharing, and how good of a job that he did. How classy he was. Because I mean, if you were here with me watching my response, most of my response was talking about how racist and awful the women at the View were. But he just calmly shut Sonny down, who kept trying to talk over him. So I want to go through his response, and we can go back a little bit to see what they were talking about, and then his response on the show. And also, the White House was asked the other day, what's their response, or what their view is on abortion rights, and what kind of laws do they want to see passed. And so they keep saying restore Roe v. Wade, and I don't think, well, obviously a lot of people have it in their mind that means that abortion is just up to 24 weeks or something, but that's not what it means. I mean, just we'll get to that toward the very, very end, because I want to talk about the Daily Wire story, and then I want to get to the Tim Scott thing, and then I'm not going to stay long on that, but I'll just spoil it now. Roe v. Wade just got overturned last year on the 24th. So if it just got overturned last year on the 24th, and there are states that have abortion up to the basically no restrictions, why do you think Roe v. Wade is a federal law that makes it abortions up to 24 weeks? And you might say, well, it's only after that if there's some kind of medical issue. That is not the case. That's not the case. So anyway, before we jump into everything, I want to thank you guys for being in the chat. Thank you guys for watching back later. Just FYI, yesterday I had some work being done, like in the house, and it was too noisy, and I had a really bad sinus headache too. So I didn't feel well and they were renovating stuff. So, I just had to take a day, and I'm glad that I'm able to, come back today and have these conversations. But thank you guys for watching now, watching later. If you like what I do here at blacktnews.com, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Costs to stream, costs to run my website, all that good stuff. So if you can support in that way, God bless you, very much appreciate it. Bible says you have not because you ask not. So I'm going ahead and asking if you can support. If you can't, I thank you guys for watching, for commenting, for adding people, for being on this journey with me. All of it really does help. So thank you very much. And please check out some stuff at the store. I saw someone in the chat yesterday had got their Life Wins shirts. So that is awesome. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that is, Life Wins. I do have them in different styles. There's like 3 different styles of the Life Wins shirts, and got the Rowan Casey aborted stuff. So we got that. We got this cool Frederick Douglass shirt that I have myself. My Money, My Business, which I did make for abortion related reasons, because I'm like, you can't say it's nobody's business if you want people to pay for stuff, man. Black tea mug. So check out the stuff at the store. And last thing I want to note, of course, is my book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion, and that is available on Amazon and Kindle, so you guys can get that. And thank you in the chat also on Monday. I saw some people said that they had liked the book and it was really good, and I didn't see that comment till after I went off the air. So thank you guys for picking that up, and thank you for reading it. As I said, it really was a big labor of love. Okay, I do have a meme. It's not a meme, but it's like a video meme. My sister actually sent this to me, so shout out to Tina. And if you guys have other like memes and things that you would, think I should show or display or talk about, you can just, the easiest way is to @ me on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, that's the easiest way. I am very bad about responding on Instagram. I do look if it's in the black tea, but it's not as often as the ads on Twitter. So that's the easiest way. Or if you want to send something like via the website or something, that's but the easiest way is just right now anyway, is just @ me on Twitter. I don't have like a bazillion people in my mentions right now, so that's just the easiest process for me. But anyway, this video is pretty funny. So, someone in my comments, I had posted about the Daily Wire story that we're about to go into on Facebook, and I didn't post a link. I just, did like a little 2-sentence thing about it, because I didn't really have time to really dive into it yet, and we were about to start the show. And someone left a comment and said something like, why should we care, basically, if the lefties are gonna, I don't know, do that to themselves? And I see like similar things about like, well, if they're sterilizing themselves, or they're sterilizing their kids, or even worse, when we talk about abortion, sometimes there'll be an edgelord on the right who's like, who cares? They're aborting their own and they're limiting themselves. And I I find that pretty unethical. And just like in general, particularly from a Christian perspective, I'm like, YOLO, mind your business is not like a part of like the intricacies of the gospel at all. That's just not how we're supposed to be wired. Though I am extremely introverted or whatever, and like to stay kind of in my own bubble, whatever. That's just not how we're supposed to be. But more practically, I will say, what makes you think they're gonna like just kind of kill themselves off through like sterilization and abortion and other stuff like that? You could say, well, they're literally doing it. They're literally doing it right now. They will just continue exploding their ideology until they hit your kids. And the people around you. They'll pluck them out. Like in California, there was a school, and I talked about this a lot, but they were recruiting kids into like LGBT clubs, and they were, convincing kids they were trans, or going along with it, hiding it from their parents, changing their medical records in the school, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But they were also like setting up, I don't know, trainings for teachers in other states and who are like in red areas so they could learn how to expand and do what they're doing. So don't think is that you can live in this world and sit and especially send your kid to a public school and then university and think they're going to be untouched. That doesn't mean that they're going to be like corrupted and totally lose their minds or anything like that. But think that they're not doing a recruiting process to continue growing their numbers, whether they sterilize themselves out of existence or kill their own, whatever. You still got kids to corrupt. That's just what they'll do. And what they'll also continue to do is they'll continue, they'll amass their numbers, they'll win elections, they'll change things in the government, they'll get, appoint leftist judges, they'll, on a federal level, on a state level, etc. And they'll use the government to affirm their ideologies. And then they'll get them to change the rights. And then, like, what are you going to do after that? You can't. And then after all that, they will subsidize it. They'll make you pay for it. And then they'll be like, well, you can't take it away because this is a right and you're paying for it too. That's how they make it legit, guys. So to really entangle your dollars within it, that's why one of the reasons why the left doesn't, play the games with the, abortion, it's so terrible, but it's still a woman's right. But yeah, you shouldn't have to pay for it. That's not their thing at all. That's not their ideology at all. It's like, yeah, you should have to pay for it. Absolutely, we should fund Planned Parenthood. Absolutely, we should find a way to entangle these federal dollars. A lot of Democrats, used to be Joe Biden's position that, we'd have the Hyde Amendment, but he totally threw that out the window when he was running in his primary. Bernie Sanders, a lot of them want to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. They believe that you should pay for that stuff. The, Planned Parenthood, ACLU folks, like they believe in, paying for that stuff. The bill that got, the constitutional amendment that just happened in Michigan, the people who opposed it were like, this is going to cause us to have to pay for abortions, and they're like, no, that's not what's going to happen. But but the language in the constitutional amendment is so similar to a bill that they tried to pass twice that literally just spelled it out. Don't trust any of these people. Hobby Lobby wanted to mind their business too, but they don't let people, they don't let people just live on their own. They want you to participate in their stuff because it helps them to normalize it. And if it's normalized, it's legitimized, etc. And there's probably no way you're going to go back. So people who think that they're just going to be like, oh, just let them, do wicked unto themselves and they'll destroy themselves. You do not exist in a vacuum. You do not exist in a bubble. You could go live in a, underground bunker with you and your family, hoping that you pass over the apocalypse. But when you wake up, it's, you're gonna be living in some kind of apocalypse, or it's gonna be some kind of what's that TV show where they were in a bunker, or they came up or something in the future, or he didn't know he was in the future, and there were like monsters outside the town or something. It was a M. Night Shyamalan. He didn't write it. I think he just produced it or something. But it was a show that was on Fox for a little while. Anyway, you can't just dodge. So people who say, just let them do whatever, who cares? You're playing a dangerous game. You really are. You really, really are. It doesn't work like that. It absolutely doesn't work like that. I mean, and especially when they want to entangle government funds, which involve taking money from you. Like, why do you think food stamps pays for, like, SNAP and stuff pays for Coke, like pop and stuff? Because they lobbied, got their own studies that said, oh, it's really good to consume calories and poor people need their calories. And if people opposed paying like SNAP for like pop and stuff, they were like, oh, these people who oppose it are racist. I'm not joking. So, it'll never just be you in a vacuum. Your enemy will come for you, and they'll take your kids. They'll take your kids. There's literally a song, they're coming for your children. So don't duck and hide, guys. Duck and cover was never going to work. Was never going to work. Anyway, let's move on to Daily Wire and this thread that Matt Walsh posted. So really big kudos to them. Okay. So, breaking, the largest trans healthcare providers in the U.S. are rubber stamping letters approving gruesome, life altering surgeries in such a racket that my producer was approved for testicle removal in 22 minutes. The tape is disturbing. First, some background. Ari Gorner is a licensed clinical social worker who educates doctors on trans healthcare. At a recent training session for Juniper Center, Gorner explained that she writes whatever letters her patients want because she's not a gatekeeper.
We sort of will go again into understanding that I'm not going to be a gatekeeper. I'm not going to be a person that's going to stop them from accessing care. I'm not there to determine if they're trans enough. I'm going to write them this letter.
So, there we go. Okay, Goner was referring to the WayPath standards, which major hospitals follow. They require that trans patients obtain a letter before undergoing surgeries. But Goner tells her audience to treat the letters as a persuasive essay and to green light even suicidal patients.
Any psych history that might be helpful to sort of showing the necessity. So if, let's say, a client has a psych history that includes like suicidal ideation or a suicide attempt, and you can connect it to the gender dysphoria, that actually can be sort of a positive, persuasive essay piece. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Because you can kind of show what this is so necessary, right? This is how this is impacting this person's life, and this is why this procedure is necessary and needed. I have found that when I frame it in a, we're going to kind of use this as a persuasive essay and we're going to really, kind of stick it to them, there's a little bit more fun with it in the way we even use language. So I found that to kind of be helpful with clients. Any psych history that might.
That's disturbing. Very fun to write an essay about your patient wanting to unalive themselves. It's very strange. I wouldn't describe that as fun in the least bit. These people are weird and grotesque. Gorner explains that insurance companies won't pay for these surgeries unless the patient is diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So she says healthcare workers should provide the diagnosis. We're using that diagnosis, she says, to ensure clients get the necessary treatment.
And who's asking us to write these letters? So oftentimes we're being asked by surgeons or physicians, but in reality, it's really for the insurance companies. That's what the letters are really for. And I think that's important for us to keep in mind. We have to use the DSM in our letters for insurance company. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. As y'all can tell, I'm not like the biggest DSM fan. So I just think it's important to highlight because of this requirement. And this is something I'll explain to the client. So I'll talk about, your insurance company is saying as, or sort of a requirement for this letter, for the surgery, that you have to have this diagnosis. And we'll kind of talk about that. So knowing that this, sort of American Psychological Association or DSM, there's this history of pathologizing and categorizing queer people as sort of sexual deviants, there is that minimal trust. So what I talk about is that we're using the diagnosis to ensure that clients get that necessary treatment.
Okay. Moving on. Whatever insurance companies might think of that, the industry standard, the popular trans telehealth service, Flox Health, for example, instructs patients that even if they don't fit the definition of gender dysphoria, the diagnosis is needed so that insurers pay out. So this is a screenshot here noting that. So that's disturbing. Phlox, which provides letters authorizing surgeries for nominal fee, goes on to admit that it is quite possible patients will receive a letter indicating a gender dysphoria diagnosis, even though they really do not have dysphoria. Yeah, talking about top surgery, that's what it says. It's quite possible the information on a letter may not be specific to you. For example, they may use a gender dysphoria diagnosis, but you really do not have dysphoria even if you want top surgery. Okay. Really don't think you should be mutilating yourself and getting your insurance to cover it for this purposes if it's this is weird stuff, guys. We reached out to Phlox about this. A staff member confirmed that a diagnosis of gender dysphoria with a word of diagnosis in scare quotes is a requirement for insurance purposes, even if it doesn't apply. So let's see message that they got right there. The largest trans healthcare provider in the U.S., Plume Clinic, runs a similar scam. They sell letters for $150 authorizing surgeries. That's how our producer, Greg, received approval for testicle removal after a 22-minute video call. In his intake from the Plume, Greg provided a fake legal name. He said he had dysphoria in the past, but he stated he had never experienced it for 6 months or more. Under the current version of the DSM-5, that means he doesn't have gender dysphoria, which the other lady said she didn't care for the DSM-5. They probably think it should just be more lenient. Plume quickly scheduled Greg for a video interview anyway. He assumed the identity of Chelsea Bussey. He didn't even attempt to pass. He badly mispronounced the name of the surgery he wanted. He made it clear he didn't know what effect the surgery would have.
So you're currently on estrogen. You're taking 6 milligrams a day.
Twice a day. Yeah, right. You got it.
So you're taking 1.5 tablets a day? Okay. And then, okay, yes, the system, significant history. All right. Okay, so let's kind of get into this a little bit. So you are seeking what surgery? Just so I can things that are of course you probably don't know, things that are irreversible when it comes to estrogen-based therapy is breast development and testicular shrinkage, right? But there's always a possibility for hair growth to come back. That may change with orchiectomy. Once you stop, once you don't no longer have your testes, you no longer have the ability for your teeth to convert to BHT because you don't have as much teeth, right? So hair growth, facial and body hair may change after orchiectomy. Fat redistribution is affected by the estrogen. So you may have less of a change of fat redistribution if you ever stop eating, but it may change as a whole. So it kind of does have a benefit without the spironolactone, but you still probably would definitely want to take estrogen as long as you would like.
I'm not complaining about the daily pills, just to be clear. I'm just saying if it accelerates it and makes things faster, then that's bad.
So, it's another video. Nevertheless, Plume's nurse practitioner said she wanted to write the most solid letter possible to justify surgery. Greg tells her that he once wrote an essay in school about being a woman, which everyone thought was ridiculous.
Give me a little bit of history with your gender dysphoria. That may kind of help me. I want to make this letter as solid as possible to be like, this orchiectomy is definitely needed.
I'll tell you, I'm happy to. So when I was in school, and I actually wrote a big essay for admission to a club about how I didn't feel like my biological sex went along with how I felt, and I told people that, and they thought it was ridiculous. So because they thought I just look like a guy, so they like this is ridiculous.
Give me a little bit of history.
Greg also tells Plume's nurse practitioner that his father has been prescribing him hormones for years. The nurse doesn't question this in any way. Instead, she says the arrangement is perfect.
And your dad is the one that's doing the hormone replacement therapy for you?
Yeah, so he's actually a doctor, and he knows a lot of doctors who do it, who prescribe it.
Perfect. And is your dad providing a letter for you as well?
No, that's part of why I'm yeah, I think there's a conflict there, and that's also part of the reasons why he involves other doctors with me as well. Is he just thinks it's better to have an independent person do it. He could have done it. He told me he could have done it, but I said, yeah, it's better not to do that.
And your dad is the one that's...
So I wonder if Matt or them, because these are just snippets, I wonder if they will release or have released somewhere else more of the interview, because I can see a lot of people saying, well, that's not enough. So because we don't know what else was said to convince him or not convince him, but as I said, it was a 22-minute conversation, so it's pretty wild. 3 days later, Plume sent this letter to Chelsea Bussey, who does not exist, saying that he was experiencing significant ongoing gender dysphoria. The letter strongly recommended Chelsea for testicle removal. So just a little up close with it. You guys can, I'm going to keep going, but you guys can pause it at a later time. The letter keeps capitalizing I don't know how to say that, sorry, without an and before it, as if it's just been a copy pasted template. Greg followed up with to learn why he had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Plume admitted they just use the letter templates. Later, Plume's nurse practitioner confirmed that in order to have surgery be paid for, the dysphoria diagnosis would need to remain. At the same time, the nurse appeared confused as to why Chelsea Bussey had requested testicle removal in the first place. And this scam is cutting edge of trans healthcare. After launching just a couple of years ago, Plume now operates in 41 states. Phlox is 47 states. How is it possible they've expanded so quickly? The answer is there's big money behind this. Plume and Phlox raised more than $45 million last year. Craft Ventures, led Plume's $14 million fundraising round. Is David Sachs aware this is going on? Are the Transform Capital and General Catalyst and Slow Ventures and Town Hall Ventures, insurance companies like Aetna and United Health Group and Cigna work with Plume? Do they know they're paying for surgeries based on obviously false information? Some states have restricted this kind of medicine. Florida, for example, recently passed a law banning most trans telehealth services. Trans activists and the Associated Press have complained that this law was onerous. They're furious because they know that gender transition industry is corrupt and fraudulent from the ground up. Protecting kids is just one piece of the puzzle. The fight begins there, but it doesn't end there. The whole industry needs to be shut down. I saw some notable people in the comments like Dean Cain and Elon Musk and other folks. So it's getting around, this report. I wonder if I think they should release the full thing with their interviewer though, but we'll see if they will or they won't, because I would assume that would be the biggest pushback they would get from this report, that maybe he said things that seem more convincing than I wrote a letter once as talking about how I was a woman or whatever. But the fact that he hadn't been like consistently dysphoric for 6 months what is obviously isn't good. Obviously isn't good. They didn't consider that into the history, and they just wanted to write the letter and let it be. But there's a lot of money involved in this stuff, for sure. So I'm not really surprised. We talked about how the Free Press, Barry Weiss, did a story about a whistleblower who worked in transgender health and stuff and had to come forth. And they're not on the right or anything, of course. And they, they're within like the community and stuff, but they couldn't deal with the sort of health care that they're giving to people. And it's just really not appropriate. So when you see politicians and people flipping out and they're like, this is what people need and this is healthcare and trans rights or human rights. I'm like, what kind of rights are you talking about? Like, because I believe everybody is entitled to free speech and the right to, bear arms and all sorts of different things. Do you have a right to, well, in the United States, you don't have a right to healthcare. It's a commodity. But do you have a right to go to a doctor and get your balls chopped off, or to have your kids have their breasts chopped off and to inject them with hormones and stuff? Nah, bruh. So I want to show you guys this video of AOC. I can't tell if this is the old one or if this is a new video of her saying this, but she just posted it the other day for Pride Month. But it's very similar to another video, at least that she did in the past. So it might be the same one, and she might just be reposting it. I didn't have enough time to double check. So regardless, she just posted this the other day. I just can't remember if this is the same outfit that she wore back then, but she went on a big tirade about what is holy, and it's not exactly the same. So I don't know if this is a different segment, a different portion in that, but it just might be a different video altogether with her saying similar things. But she thinks that denying trans people health care is just deeply unholy.
And it is part of my faith that all people are holy and all people are sacred unconditionally. And that is what makes faith sometimes, that's what prompts us to transform, because it is unconditional. It's not about that it is up to us to love parts of people. We love all people. There is nothing holy about rejecting medical care of people, no matter who they are on the grounds of what their identity is. There is nothing holy about turning someone away from a hospital. There's nothing holy about rejecting a child from a family. There's nothing holy about writing discrimination into the law. And I am tired of communities of faith being weaponized and being mischaracterized because the only time religious freedom is invoked is in the name of bigotry and discrimination. I'm tired of it. It is not up to us. It is not up to us to deny medical care. It is up to us to feed the hungry, to clothe the poor, to protect children, and to love all people as ourselves.
So, she just shared that, and at least this month anyway, for Pride Month and stuff. That's just like a whole completely misunderstanding of the gospel, and I don't know what she thinks is holy. I mean, I guess she just said it, but like, how would she define holiness? I don't know. You could just go back to Genesis. God made male and female, and that's what it is. The sex is that, it's binary. You got the male and the female, and they come together and become one flesh, and they're fruitful and they multiply, and they keep it going. They keep it moving. So, love, as I often have to keep saying, according to the Bible, it doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but it rejoices in the truth. And there's a scripture. It was in something, maybe Proverbs, something like the harsh words of a friend is better than poison from an enemy or something. Or I'm saying it wrong, but I'm like, it's such a good verse. Maybe I could look it up while we're doing different things. But or someone's in the chat as a Bible scholar could look it up really quick. I'm like paraphrasing, but I'm not quite saying it right. But the point of it is that sometimes you have to say things that make people uncomfortable that you care for, and it's better to tell them the truth than to keep, coddling them into a delusion. Like I've mentioned before, how celebrities will get people who will just be yes men, and they'll get them their every whim, and they will just love them into an early grave. And it's really troubling. It's really disgusting. And when she acts and other people act as though a trans person could go to a hospital and have a bullet wound and they'd be like, we can't treat this person, they're trans. That's not happening. That's not happening in the least bit. Could it be that they're going to the hospital and they're like, I don't want to chop off your healthy breasts because there's no need to? That's a different story. And I find it so interesting. You guys know I talk about abortion a lot, and so many people will say, well, why don't you just fight for women to be able to get hysterectomies? And I have I guess complex feelings about that, because I'm like, if a doctor isn't your slave. If they don't want to do that for various reasons, I don't think we should force them. So if that's really what you want, you need to be able to advocate that to the doctors. But I don't want to do something like legislatively to make them do that because that's what you want. I don't think that's right. But I do think it's interesting that and women can get them like all over the place, but there are women who've run into situations where their husband has to agree, or the doctors don't want to do it because they haven't had enough kids or whatever. But it's harder for women to go get their tubes tied, than it is for like a girl to have like surgery to take out her sex organs. That's pretty wild to me, that there's people willing to just like pass these letters off and do this irreversible damage to these people. But if a woman is just like, you know what, I'm done having kids, they're like, are you sure? Are you sure? You want to talk that over with your husband, or you might regret it. And there's people, and I think those are valid concerns and reasons from the doctors of why they don't want to do it. And there could be other kind of complications and stuff. So again, my feelings are, complicated on it, but I'm firmly in I don't want to make doctors do that. So if you really want those procedures done and done more easy, then you need to make that case. But that doesn't have anything to do with me on a rights kind of standpoint. And I don't have to stop advocating for the unborn being killed and focus my attention on your right to that I don't think you actually have to get your tubes tied or something like that. So, I mean, not that I'm saying you shouldn't be able to do it, but again, healthcare is not a right, especially in the United States. I want to say thank you to the super chat though. Let me get rid of AOC here. It is crazy that there's all these different procedures that are pretty crazy that people have, and they don't want to do them in other circumstances, but they have to for their health, and the people just kind of do it for cosmetic surgery, which they don't. The insurance companies, especially like California stuff, started changing how they view transgender surgeries and stuff. I saw a report on that. I'll have to talk about that another day because I don't have it right in front of me. But yeah, this stuff is really wild. I guess I want to move on though. I hope they do release like the whole 22-minute conversation though. I'm assuming the whole thing isn't very interesting, but I think that'll be the best way for them to avoid further pushback from folks. But that's pretty awful though. That's pretty awful. Someone who's not dysphoric, or people saying they don't have to be dysphoric, or they don't want to, or the conversations about how they don't want to gatekeep how trans someone is. So this is all just like affirmation. There is no really other path forward. And I don't know, allegedly how it used to be with people who were back in the day being, diagnosed with gender dysphoria, went through a longer process and had counseling and all kinds of different stuff. And it was years before they kind of leapt to this stuff. But But people have to know when they start their kids off, like with the social transitioning, and then they get on the puberty blockers, they're on a path where they're likely not going to turn back from. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but you're interfering with their development in a very destructive manner when you should just let them grow, let them discover themselves, find out themselves. It's really not just the prepubescent kids or the kids who are just starting to come either puberty or the teenagers and stuff, even like young people, like young adults, the idea of many of them, looking at themselves in the mirror and saying they don't like themselves and they want to change. I'm just like, so many people don't even glow up until they're like 30, and there's just so much in life to just discover. And the idea of all these people just being unhappy with themselves and them going to someone who says, I agree with you, something is wrong with your body, let me help you self-harm. But we'll call it healthcare. We'll pump you full of drugs. We'll chop off your healthy body parts and reconstruct you in a way because, yes, there's something wrong with your body. That's so destructive. It's so destructive. Anyway, let's move on to The View. So, I really appreciate Tim Scott. We talked about Sonny and their conversations about Tim Scott when he announced. And I want to go back and play a little bit of their commentary so we can see his response and react to it.
It could be good.
Well, let me be the curmudgeon, I guess. I don't know who his message is supposed to resonate with, actually. He's talking about victimhood and personal responsibility as if people aren't taking responsibility for their own actions. And it just seems to me that the Republican Party has a real racism problem. I mean, and those aren't my words, those are the words of Michael Steele. In 2018, he was asked as the former RNC chairperson that was the first black person to hold that position. And he said there's a real problem with racism within the Republican Party. And he should know. And so it seems to me that, at this point, Tim Scott is only polling at 1.8%. Donald Trump is still the front runner at 56.3%. And I do people are surprised at that, but yes, and Ron DeSantis is at 19.4%. And so it just seems to me that this is, and black people make up 2% of registered Republicans. So it's a very tiny fraction. I don't know that the overwhelming base would vote for someone like Tim Scott.
I do want to note that someone in my comments did bring up the scripture, Proverbs 27:6. Faithful are the wounds from a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It was something like that, I knew. So they also said another comment that was disrespectful, so I'm going to play that too.
I think one of the issues that Tim Scott has is that he seems to think because I made it, everyone can make it, ignoring, again, the fact that he is the exception and not the rule. And until he is the rule, then he can stop talking about systemic racism.
He's got Clarence Thomas syndrome.
But I do think that he has championed.
So imagine like an audience clapping to that. Like, yeah, he's the exception. These Negroes can't succeed in America. Woo! Like, you terrible, terrible audience. There's literally 2 black people on the show getting paid for their stupid opinions every day. I would like to think I would have handled things as classy as Tim Scott, but if I just, I'm very appreciative when people are like, oh, you speak so eloquently and you're so unbiased. And I appreciate that, but I don't feel like that's always the case. And especially with these broads on The View, totally not a fan. But when we talked about this, when they said these comments, I was pretty offended, especially with their comments with Clarence Thomas, because I'm like, y'all don't know his story, do you? How hard of a life that he had, the journey that he went through, being someone who was jaded by racial discrimination and the state of the country, and watching it being in a worse state, obviously, than it is today. Maybe our racial tensions are so inflated, it's just ridiculous. But he got to see how mistreated Black people were, and he became bitter, and he became jaded to the point where he was like out there on the streets protesting and doing stuff, to a point where he couldn't even recognize himself, and he had to pray to God to take that hatred out of his heart. And he had walked away from his faith because he had a Catholic upbringing and stuff. But the schools and stuff that he went to, he saw that some of the people in there were racist, and they weren't doing enough, in his opinion, to really speak out about injustice. So he walked away, became really radical, went way too far, and then started a journey on the way back. And you know, he worked very hard, and he had a grandfather who raised him and taught him to work very hard. And he refined his, you know, his judicial philosophy, and he got to where he was, and and they just tore him down because they hated him, and he had to go through the high-tech lynching, you know, with the Anita Hill thing, which, by the way, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I just want to put into context that people back then in the day did not believe her, including Democrats. And as a matter of fact, my parents were not Democrats at the time, and they did not believe Anita Hill. And so my mom was like, "You crazy? Why would you be doing this and calling him?" And I'm just like, "Okay, Mom." People didn't find her story to be legitimate, but you know, people came out against him because they were afraid of what he would do, like eventually, especially with, you know, Roe v. Wade. You know, praise God for him. But the NAACP wasn't supposed to do anything as far as his confirmation, but then in the end they needed them to act and come against Clarence Thomas, because once the Black group went after the Black men, it signaled all the white people that it was okay to attack him. So it's for them to go after Clarence Thomas as if he didn't have a hard life, but probably with similar mentalities that they did back then, and just had a positive, constructive turnaround to the you know, left the dark side, came into the light or whatever. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, let's look at Tim Scott and his response to them, because it was so classy how he just addressed Sonny in particular. And Sonny says stuff all the time that is directed toward, you know, Black Republicans and conservatives and stuff. She's the one who said being a Black Republican is an oxymoron. She is not fair and good with this stuff at all. So he was really, really classy to her.
That you don't believe in systemic racism. What is your definition of systemic racism?
Let me answer the question that you've answered.
Or does it even exist in your mind?
Let me.
So I do want to point it, because I don't think he really answers that question. He just starts addressing the sort of things that she talked about. But systemic racism, it's funny how much people on the left talk about it, but when, like, an obvious example of systemic racism, like, you have these systems in place that had like this racist sort of origin, and then there's a disparate impact today because of it. Now, which it doesn't matter if the intention is still racist today, if there's still like a disproportionate impact or whatever between like the races and stuff, they'll still consider it systemic. So it's very hard for it not to exist. It's just a matter of like people on the right thinking like, is that even like a fair, appropriate sort of definition, if it doesn't even matter what the intention of things in place today are? Or but if you're going to go that route and say that systemic racism exists, how is Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry and all that stuff not an example of systemic racism? and when you point that out, they'll be like, well, it's because it's a woman's choice. Yeah, they set these places up like predatory lenders in neighborhoods where there's a lot of minorities. I have a article about the societal harm of abortion, and I have embedded in the article different pictures that Planned Parenthood has had for advertisements for Mother's Day, gruesomely and sickly. But it's Hispanic women, it's Black women. If you read their reports or whatever, they have like some white people speckled about, but it's a lot of it is geared toward minorities. People say minorities, especially women of color, they need abortion. That's what they say. You had Janet Yellen talking about how poor women of color need abortion. Actually, Tim Scott was like, as someone who was raised in abject poverty, I'm just like glad that, I'm here as a senator today. So, when people want to talk about systemic racism and there's a disproportionate amount of Black babies that are killed, why don't we talk about that? Like in Michigan, and I have an article about this, when COVID was killing disproportionate amount of Black people, which we got some comorbidities, man. We're very heavy and other stuff like that, high blood pressure, etc. But they were like, oh, it's racism. And we have to announce a health crisis of racism, which is really wild. Because I'm like, so you're saying our doctors and our nurses who were heroes like 5 seconds ago, like, we stay home for our heroes. You're saying that Black people are dying because they're racist, because it's the kind of medical care that we're receiving, right? So I mean, that's a little weird. But they said it was a health crisis. But if you look at the numbers of abortions done in Michigan, 56% of the abortions are killing Black babies. And we're only like 14% of the population. So why is that a health crisis of racism, but this isn't? And they're so more gung-ho to keep having more and more and more, and to fund it and to get rid of restrictions and all kinds of other stuff. They want more of it. They don't like pregnancy crisis centers, and they don't want ads. Our governor vetoed money that's supposed to go to pregnancy crisis centers and programs that were supposed to encourage adoption over abortion. So they don't even want people to be persuaded to not have an abortion. So their goal isn't less women having abortions. So it's definitely not less Black babies dying. So why not talk about that? And there's other things we could also talk about, but I don't want to get too off topic. I want to go back to Tim Scott. But there's more, I promise you.
Answer the question this way. One of the things I think about, and one of the reasons why I'm on the show, is because of the comments that were made, frankly, on this show, that the only way for a young African-American kid to be successful in this country is to be the exception and not the rule. That is a dangerous, offensive, disgusting message to send to our young people today, that the only way to succeed is by being the exception. I will tell you that if my life is the exception, I can't imagine.
But it is.
But it's not, actually. It's
been 114 years.
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is we've had an African-American president, African-American vice president. We've had 2 African-Americans to be secretaries of the state. In my home city, the police chief is an African-American who's now running for mayor. The head of the highway patrol for South Carolina is an African-American.
Still
in
exceptions.
In 1975, there was about 15% employment in the African-American community. For the first time in the history of the country, it's under 5%.
40% homelessness.
And 50% of the folks in our community
get 13% of the population.
You had the chance to ask the question. I know that I've watched you on the show that you like people to be deferential and respectful, so I'm going to do the same thing.
True.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to suggest the fact of the matter is that progress in America is palpable. It can be measured in generations. I look back at the fact that my grandfather, born in 1921 in Sally, South Carolina, when he was on a sidewalk, a white person was coming, he had to step off and not make eye contact. That man believed then, with some doubt now, in the goodness of America, because he believed that having faith in God, faith in himself, and faith in what the future could hold for his kids would unleash opportunities in ways that you cannot imagine. Every kid today can look, just change the stations and see how much progress has been made in this country. ABC, NBC, CBS, ESPN, CNN, Fox News all have African-American and Hispanic hosts. So what I'm suggesting is that yesterday's exception is today's rule. And for us to suggest...
So America has met its promise.
No, of course, the concept of America is that we are going to become a more perfect union. But in fact, the challenges that we faced 50 years ago and 60 years...
I'm going to let him keep talk. I'm going to let him finish, but I thought that was such a good line. The promise of America is to become a more perfect union, that we don't stop striving to be better. So I thought that was so good. So yeah, we'll keep going.
years ago should not be the same challenges that we face today. And here's a way that you measure that. When my mother was born, about 10% of African Americans got a high school degree, diploma. Today, it's over 90%. When you look at the income, success that we've had.
That's an HBCU stat.
Well, listen, HBCU stat is a good one, because one of the reasons why I took the funding for HBCUs to the highest level in the history of the country, and then I helped make it permanent, is because I believe that education is the closest thing to magic in America. So I'm about making sure that our kids have as many opportunities to succeed as possible. It's one of the reasons why
I need an opportunity to succeed because I have to go to break. They're
we have more time, though.
They're big. You're coming.
I'm just getting started.
I know.
I believe all people can see the success that I've had.
We'll be right back.
Okay.
So, that was great. He did such a good job. And, you know, I'd want to do a job as good as that. I don't know. I think I would have gone like passive aggressive, like Candace Owens. You know, you're a racist, Sonny. He handled it so well. So I don't know. I got to pray on myself or something. But yeah, he did such a fantastic job. Telling his story, telling the American story, the story about American progress and how far we have really come as a nation. And we have. There's things that my parents went through that I didn't have to go through. My dad has some wild stories, and he's high yellow, but it was a different time back then. When and I'm not saying that there's not issues or whatever now, but the sort of stories that he went through or people in his family went through, where, his father, their grandfather, just keep going back and back, and not too far back, you get people who were enslaved, but, we have had a lot of enormous progress, and for them to just keep insisting that Tim Scott is the exception, and Sonny just looked like, she hated every moment of him succeeding and talking. Like, she had a smile, but it seemed so fake. If you go back and watch her face, and she did keep interrupting, and he used her words back on her to kind of stop her for a moment. But he did such a good job at just explaining the power of American progress. And he is the exception, and for people to think the real danger of people thinking, oh, they're just the exception, is that people start to just disqualify themselves because they think that that they can't reach that goal. That's just a special thing that happened to them, when everybody has the same kind of opportunity in America to succeed. And maybe you're going to run into different obstacles. Life isn't fair. Life isn't fair for white people and black people and Hispanic people. Like, people will run into different obstacles. Like me living in a loving 2-parent home, there's people who don't have that. A lot of people who don't have that. And that is no small advantage. And whatever issues, like financially and stuff, that we have had growing up or whatever, I didn't lack for love in my home. And I made a post about Mother's Day, and people were like, oh yeah, that's great, and saying some nice things about their mom, but there's people who can't say anything about the homes that they were raised in. And that is heartbreaking to me. I'm so very blessed, not privileged. A lot of people throw that around. I'm not privileged. I'm very blessed, very blessed, very blessed. But I grew up, like, half my school career was like in an inner city, and the other half was like in a rural area. And so many kids, very few black people in our school district, but there were so many kids who didn't have the sort of home that I grew up in. And I wouldn't trade that, even if they were better financially off and stuff. I wouldn't trade their lives for mine, because I still had a loving 2-parent God-fearing home. So life is not fair for a lot of people, but the question is, what are you going to do about it now going forward? Are you going to correct the mistakes that your parents made, or are you going to follow in the same kind of cycle? Are you going to do what the Brookings Institute says and, graduate high school, get a job, keep a job, don't have kids until you're married? Doing those 3 things, they say that you won't be permanently poor in the United States if you follow those rules. But a lot of people are breaking those rules. And unfortunately, a lot of Black people are breaking those rules. We have a lot of people having kids out of wedlock and stuff, which Sonny mentioned systemic racism. Let me go back to it. The welfare state, and not just the welfare state, but even like minimum wage. The minimum wage was designed not to help people, well, to help some people, but not certainly to help all people. But it was created to get rid of competitive wages, because there'd be people who thought they were too good to work for competitive wages that might have been lower. So they wanted to raise the prices to like a wage that they were willing to work, but it would outprice people. It's more complicated to say, like, lines of race or something, because it was other people who maybe were white, but you wouldn't but they still deem like lower people who they didn't want really being employed either. But it definitely impacted like Blacks and stuff. So just purpose of example, let's say there's a white guy who wanted to work for who the least they'll work for is $5 or something, but the Black person will work for $4.50. So the Black person who has a job and is working, that salary to try to take care of the family or something. Well, if they do the minimum wage and they're like, I'm going to hire the white guy, not the Black guy, because we're still talking about the past. So they knew that eugenicists used to have a lot more power within our different institutions in America, and so they were aware, or at least suspected, that minimum wage would outprice different minorities from the labor market, but they thought it was a good thing. Royal Meeker, who worked for the Woodrow Wilson administration, thought it would put them on welfare, and he wanted Black people, well, not just Black people, I'm sorry, but he wanted people on welfare because he didn't want them left to their own devices to be able to kind of forge their own destiny, take care of their families, etc. But if they were in the government teat, they were easier to control. So I think conservatives, people on the right, kind of dismiss a lot of the racial injustice too quickly. And I'm not saying that, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea that people obviously have the power to go out and become a Tim Scott. Everyone has that capability, but there has been like this dark force, I guess, that has tried to undermine the success of Americans in general. So that's something that we have to work to make people see. But a lot of these people who are talking about systemic racism and injustice and stuff are supporting policies that have led to a far worse America. So I guess that's one of the reasons why we're here having these conversations. But anyway, I thought what he said was so good, and I appreciate Tim Scott. Don't think he has a snowball's chance of winning that seat in the primary, but I think it's good for him to be in the race. I think it's good for a lot of these people to be in the race. I think non-serious people need to drop out before some of these big races start happening. Like the actual voting and stuff happens. But I wonder if he would be a VP, a pick for some people. I don't see him making it to the White House as a president. I can see someone wanting him to be like VP though. So anyway, great job. So last thing I want to know is this video from the White House was asked about Roe v. Wade, and I just wanted to share it really quickly. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who just don't understand what Roe v. Wade was.
Last night refused to answer a question about whether she would sign a bill for a 6-week abortion ban if it came to her desk, saying that the administration has not yet outlined their position on whether they would sign bills allowing abortions at 37, 38, 39 weeks. Could you give us the sort of correct position of the administration in terms of what kind, if any, kinds of restrictions on abortion the administration supports?
So I didn't watch this town hall, so can't really speak to exactly what she said. What I can speak to, what the president has said, which is that he will continue to call on Congress to restore Roe v. Wade. And so if you know the particulars of Roe v. Wade, you see what the president stands. So I'll just leave it there for now.
So the particulars of Roe v. Wade just indicate that you'd still be able to have abortions up until the time of birth. So again, think about this. Think about this. If you think, because people think Roe v. Wade and they think 24 weeks. And I saw someone, I think in LifeSite News had posted that clip, and there was someone like in the comments saying, yeah, 24 weeks, that's what they want. And people are like, that's not what Roe v. Wade does. They're like, well, people don't usually do full-term births. And like, that's not the point of this conversation. So they say restore Roe v. Wade because that's what people are thinking in their heads, which Roe v. Wade isn't just Roe v. Wade. There's like Doe that happened afterwards too that, change and tweak some stuff too. But think about this for a moment, because Colorado and other places, Warren Hearn, for example, is a very famous abortion doctor. I think it was last week or maybe the week before, we went through an article from The Atlantic with him talking about his practice and how, he handles abortions and has handled late-term abortions for a long time. And Roe v. Wade was in place and women were still having abortions beyond 24 weeks. And they were doing it even if it wasn't a life or death situation. And when people think about life and death situations, especially when the baby is viable, it is safer. I'm going to talk in general because I'm not going to say definitively because I am not a doctor. So maybe there's some kind of unforeseeable situation that I can't think of. But if you're in a medical emergency situation, it is better to induce the baby to make them come out. Because if it's very late, you're going to have to carry that baby around while they prepare your cervix and stuff for you to be able to deliver. So the best thing to do is either induce it or to have like some kind of emergency C-section. Because why would you wait days if, I don't know, you have like your blood pressure spikes and you're dying or something like that? That doesn't make any sense. So there are women, and I know people don't want to think about people doing this, that will have late-term abortions, healthy women having late-term abortions, on healthy fetuses. And that's been going on beyond just this past year, because Roe v. Wade got overturned this month, last year on the 24th. So if that was still going on in places where there's, little to no restrictions, why do you think that Roe v. Wade says, yeah, you can't have abortions after like 24 weeks, or you can't have abortions after like 24, 28 weeks unless it's like life of the mother? So that's not what it does. What it does is that it gives parameters for different restrictions that you can impose, but it doesn't impose those restrictions. So when Biden says they try to go to like, we'll just restore Roe v. Wade, that's not him saying that. People have it in their head. They're like, well, Biden is saying that we shouldn't have abortions past 24 weeks or something. Or viability. That's not what that means. That's not what that means. So I just want to throw that out there so people understand that sort of lingo. So anyway, thank you guys for watching today. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, different videos, etc. Please check out my book, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. That's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble as well. So thank you to the folks who have, gotten it and read it and started and left a review. So thank you very much for your comments. And again, it was a big labor of love for anyone who's like, why go the theological approach? Because I just thought it was needed, to be frank. And I figured, why not? Well, I'll tell you a big reason right now. I don't want to go through a whole big rabbit hole, but there are people in the pro-life movement who are, Christian and stuff, who will just be like, oh, I'm against abortion because it's my religion. And if you're a non-religious person, you might be thinking they're in a cult and they just believe that because their sky daddy said so or something like that. But when a religious person might be saying that, they're relating it to different ethical things and philosophy. Like, we're all made in the image of God, and it's immoral to take. There's a lot of things that you may not be religious, but you would agree with in the ethics of the Bible anyway. So if a good way to sort of break some of those ethics down and be able to explain themselves and even make the case beyond, like, even if you don't agree with me on this as far as a theological standpoint, the ethics there, that you could still agree with this to a point, like objective morality of, hey, it's objectively wrong to take this life at this particular point. Because if you start popping in personhood and you decide that someone's a person here, or you decide there's a person there, what's to stop you from deciding that I'm not a person because I'm, I don't know, black? Can't say that hasn't happened before, not to me specifically, but you know, the ancestral lineage and stuff. So if you get to pick and choose personhood from a position of foreknowledge of what a fetus lacks, that's not really appropriate or fair. But again, like, who's to say if you get to pick and choose, what happens when someone picks and chooses when someone's life should be protected and they exclude you? So it's in everyone's best interest to not trust each other so we can just have a very consistent viewpoint of when our life begins, our existence begins. That's when we should, you know, value the right to life. So there's all kinds of different arguments in there. So it's one of the many reasons is to help refine other believers, kind of explain their moral positions. And I think that's necessary anyway, because, you know, even if I don't say anything about religion, people are like, well, you're a Christian, so you believe X, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, okay, let me explain why it makes sense that I believe X, Y, and Z. and I don't think you really probably disagree with most of like X, Y, and Z. So one of the many reasons why I wrote the book. So please go check out the book. And next Tuesday at 7 p.m., I think it's next Tuesday, Deborah Tilden will be joining me. Deborah Tilden is the co-founder of Smart Women's Healthcare. She had a abortion right before she got married. You know, it was like they're Christians, but didn't want the shame, I guess, and had an abortion, and she was told, you know, glob of tissue, her life would, you know, go on like as if nothing happened, and she was never normal. So she understands and a lot of the psychological effects of abortion, but has also studied a lot of the other physical and other sort of impacts of abortion. So she does a lot of really good work and helping women to heal. And so her focus, I mean, she obviously cares and doesn't want babies to be aborted, but she also really has a focus on the women and the repercussions of what can happen to the women after they have abortion, things that are very unspoken. So she'll be a really good guest to talk about that topic. And again, that's going to be at 7 o'clock on the 13th is next week. Yeah, so at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm very excited about that. As I said, she does great work. So I will see you guys tomorrow, same time, so at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So if you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation at blackteeners.com. Check out different content on the website. Make sure that you guys leave in your email so there's different notifications for events and so on. You'll get an email and stuff about it. So God bless you. See you tomorrow.